Yeah, I had two mothers. So there was Nanny, who really did all the mothering, and then there's my biological mother, who I didn't really get to know, even to this day.
And yet you did seem to go off the rails after a point when your birth mother tried to get you back at the age of 9. That must have been very difficult.
Yeah, it was very confusing, because by the time I was 9, I didn't really see my birth mother as being my mother. And there was sort of a sort of interesting racial confusion I had, in that I didn't really see myself as black, because I've been around so many white people all of my life.
I mean, did you get any explanation as to why you'd been given away? I mean, your actual mother, simply put an advert in the back of a magazine, didn't she?
Yeah, and as bizarre as that sounds, at that time, she was one of, thousands even, of mothers, mainly West African for some reason, who were advertising their babies in that way for cheap childcare.
And Nanny answered this, and yet a woman and comparatively elderly to be taking on a baby at that time. That must have been very difficult for her. Did she ever tell you why she decided to do it?
Well, I wasn't the first African baby Nanny had fostered. There were two brothers she'd fostered before me. I'm not entirely sure what led her to begin fostering, but she'd always loved babies.
There does seem at the moment, doesn't there, to be a bit of a trend, if you like, if you can put it that way, and particularly celebrities, white celebrities, adopting black babies from various continents, actually, when you look at the figures. You talked about your confused identity. Does it raise concerns for you when you see that happening in the media spotlight?
It does actually raise concerns. I've obviously seen Angelina Jolie adopt children from Africa, and Madonna. Sandra Bullock has now adopted an African-American baby. And I don't like the idea of black children being treated almost like fashion accessories or gimmicks. I do wonder why these celebrities don't perhaps consider adopting a white child, or in Madonna's case, even adopting an African-American child. It just sort of seems like it's a real trend now to get an African baby. And that can't be good, even if the intentions are good.
And even when you are adopted or fostered at that very early age, as you were, why does it lead to such a cultural identity problem? Is it simply down to the colour of your skin?
It sounds like a small thing, the colour of your skin, and Nanny, who brought me up, would constantly say, we're all the same, we're the same underneath, which we all, of course, are. But I think, especially being a minority, as black people are in England, sort of white culture dominates already, and there is that feeling that black people are somehow less capable or inferior, and sort of it's much worse if you don't have other people around you who are of the same ethnic background as you.
What I found astonishing reading the book was that your mother had given you away at that very early age, and yet at the age of, 9, she tried to get you back, and then almost seemed to have the nerve, if I can put it that way, to be affronted and offended that you didn't want to go back with her. Oh,
I think she was absolutely shocked. Because what was quite interesting about my upbringing was Nanny, although Nanny came from quite a middle-class background, by the time I came to Nanny, she lived on a council estate and didn't have much money, and my mother came from a privileged background. So my mother had a really quite unpleasant attitude towards my foster mother, which was that she was the help, the paid help. So she obviously thought, this woman is almost just a servant. So my mother was shocked that I loved Nanny and wanted to stay there. I don't think it occurred to her that could be the case.
As all of this, as you went through this and went through your teenage years, as I said earlier, you did really go off the rails, didn't you?
Big time.
And you ended up having a child of your own, who was brought up, I think I'm right in saying, by Nanny's daughter.
Yeah.
Is that a loop? Did you see history almost repeating itself there?
I think very sadly, sort of my idea of sort of what motherhood was extremely confused and strange. And unfortunately, I had this idea that white people could raise children and be very maternal, but that black women couldn't, which is an awful thing to say. But, all I saw was African women dropping off their children in this family and then going away for long periods of time. So it took me a long time to sort of realise that's not the norm. So
it's clearly been a tremendously traumatic experience. I wonder why you decided to write the book, whether it's been helpful to write the book, and indeed what that process itself was like for you, having to relive all of this.
Yeah, I think it was a very ambitious plan to think I could write this book and sort of find it a fairly easy process. It wasn't at all. It was actually quite horrific at times. So it has been cathartic, but in a really brutal way. It wasn't just a case of a few tears here and there. It was really explosive. But it's had almost like a sort of cleansing effect, because I've had conversations with people, you know, in my foster family and my biological family that were overdue, long overdue, and it's transformed my relationship with my own daughter as well, just sort of going through the process of writing it.
And what did the foster family and your biological family make of what you've had to say? Because it's not just a case of what happened, but obviously your own personal take on what happened and why people did what they did.
Yeah, my foster sister, who's called Wendy in the book, who's actually old enough to be my mother and who I see as a mother figure, you know, she's read the book and she's been extremely supportive, and we had conversations we just simply never had, because while I was living all of this, we didn't sit down and talk about it and unpick it, and no one said this is weird even. It was just how it was. So I think it's fantastic to, you know, to be able to talk about it.
And what about your actual family and your real mother? Any contact there?
I still have contact with my real mother and my real family. I think they would rather I didn't write about or talk about the history, and I've noticed that it's like that with other black people I've met who are privately fostered by white families, and they don't talk about it.
I wonder what it's like to know that something like this, something so deeply personal, I mean, you said writing it was cathartic, but people are reading it, we're talking about it, people are watching this and knowing all these intimate details about what you've been through in your life. Does that actually help in any way?
I mean, I think no. I don't think anyone should imagine that writing a memoir and putting it out there is your chance to heal. I think you need to heal and then write the story if you want to. So it does feel a little bit like being naked in public, but I'm able to take it because I've explored all of this history now, and I'm finally comfortable with it. You know, it's certainly not all pretty, but you know, I've accepted it and taken it on board.
And the positive side of this, as you said, a better, stronger relationship with your daughter.
Yeah. So I think very much the book is dedicated to her, and I think this is my sort of explanation of this is what happened before you're born. This is how things came to be as they are. And I don't think she was even really clear, my daughter, on why I was in West Sussex in the first place, or why I wasn't with my real family. You know, she finds it really hard to believe that I or anyone else could have been advertised in a magazine, because it's just not her reality.
It's fascinating stuff. Precious Williams, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.